It's been a little over 2 years since the first Vermintide End Times came out, bringing us a unique take on the Left 4 Dead formula set in the Warhammer universe. And now we've got Vermintide 2, which sets to push the boundaries further of this type of genre. But does it do enough? To start off, the biggest change with Warhammer Vermintide 2 is the addition of Norska Chaos Warriors to the list of enemies you'll fight, alongside the Skaven that you fought in the first game. The story picks off right after the first game with you and your party members trapped in a Skaven underground tunnel where they're constructing a skitter gate to bring in the Norska Chaos Warriors. It's worth mentioning that the story is pretty passable in this game. There is a branching story that tries to connect each individual mission, but it's not really given to you in a very interesting or compelling way. There's no cutscenes or anything that's really going to bridge the gap, and as a result, if you're looking for a story, this probably isn't the game for you. The gameplay is pretty similar to Left 4 Dead. Basically, you and a party of 3 other people join together to try and make it to the end of the mission. Sometimes the missions are a bit different, and it's not necessarily just getting from A to B, but also having to complete different objectives, such as loading cannons to blow up sieging equipment, or destroying these devices that they're using. There's 5 different classes you can play as. You've got the elf, there's 2 human characters, there's the mage, and then there's also the dwarf. For the most part, the characters are pretty different. The mage is way different than the others. For example, she has an overheat mechanic that she has to use to try and make sure that she keeps magic usage down, otherwise she can overheat and just combust and explode, killing herself. The other characters are much more melee-based. They also don't have the overheat mechanics or anything, and they have a much more limited supply of ranged weapons, so they're mostly melee for the most part. As you level up, you'll get talent tree points you can use to try and specialize your character towards different things and to give yourself certain benefits. And there's also 2 subclasses for each individual, aside from your main one that you play as. So for example, Sienna the mage can eventually become a pyromancer, which changes some of her abilities and the talent trees that she has available. Each character also has its unique special abilities, like for example, the witch hunter has an ability that can boost the critical hit chance of nearby party members. Sienna has an ability where she can basically throw out a giant AoE flame strike that kills people. And then Sienna also has another ability if you get the Pyromancer, where it's like a chain of fire that basically you send out and then it trails and hunts down heat-seeking enemies, killing them in the process. Overall, I really like the class design. It ensures that there's a high amount of replayability to this game and also a lot of diversity so that each individual player can basically switch over and choose one that fits them well. The balance, though, is a little bit off. Some of the characters are way better than others and some of them are just way weaker, so that's one thing to keep in mind. Another area this game does a pretty good job in is the diversity of enemies. So you've got the Skaven and the Chaos Warriors, and each individual category has their own types of sub-monsters in them. So there's different types of rats and different types of Chaos Warriors. You've also got the elite monsters that you'll run into. So for example, you've got the giant tank-light rat, you've got the poison rat, and the rat that'll hook grab you and try and pull you away from your teammates. And then another area that this game does a really amazing job that really you have to commend it 100% in is the level design. It is amazing. It's pretty rare that you run into a game that has this good of level design. They really clearly took a lot of care and attention to try and make sure that each individual level felt different and distinct from another. Like I mentioned earlier, you've got the level where you literally load cannon shots and try and blow up sieging equipment. There's also a level that takes place in an underground mine that feels very dark and scary and spooky. It's just interesting. Each individual level has a very, very different feel to one another. And that's great because this game is heavily lenient on replayability. You can get a couple hours out of it just playing through each individual level once with a character, but this game is very much built for replaying levels to try and gain levels and to advance your character and get new loot, because at the end of each level you get equipment that you can unlock and then use to outfit your character to make them stronger or more defensible. And this game's pretty difficult, even on the lowest difficulty settings. If you don't work together, don't communicate, you're going to die a lot. And the added replayability of each level really allows this to feel fresh, even though you're playing through it several times. Now, graphically, this game looks pretty good. There's some levels in particular where I kind of stopped for a second. I was like, wow, this looks really good. Performance-wise, this game ran pretty well. I pretty rarely ever had any issues with the frame rate dropping. And finally, we have the bugs, which are numerous in this game. And that's quite a problem because there are some levels in particular that I had it kind of just bug out. Certain things wouldn't work. I couldn't progress. There was one part in particular where I got to a boss fight where the boss quite literally just stood there, which was really frustrating because it's kind of a big moment. You know, you're building through all these different levels to get to a giant boss fight, and then the enemy just kind of quite literally stands there and doesn't do anything and bugs out. Overall, Vermintide 2 gets an 8 out of 10. I had a lot of fun with it, and I think it's one of the best games in its category. It is a game best played in co-op with other friends, otherwise you'll be stuck with random people, and oftentimes the random people don't communicate or talk, which can kind of suck, especially on the higher level of difficulty. The biggest problem is that much like an ARPG, this game is very lenient on replaying content over and over and over to try and get more levels and new loot so that you can progress your character. However, despite these problems, I really did enjoy it, and if you're a fan of ARPGs or Left 4 Dead or Killing Floor 2, you're probably going to like this this game because it's very similar, just much more well done.